There are lots of challenges of working in a family business too, and I think it's really important going in with your eyes wide open of who is currently in the family business, what are their goals and their dreams, what do they want from the next generation. I think it warrants not just a chat, it warrants a lot of thought and open dialogue on where do we want to go and do I actually fit into this?
You're listening to Freight Famous, presented by Rose Rocket, bringing you the people that make trucking move. From behind the scenes into the limelight. Here's your host, Justin Bailie.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Freight Famous, a podcast produced by Rose Rocket. New episodes of Freight Famous will be released twice a month. On this podcast, we talk with guests about how they build, scale, and automate their trucking and transportation businesses. I'm your host, Justin Bailie, co-founder at Rose Rocket. I have a very special guest here with me today. Now, this show is called Freight Famous, and I think we are trying to help people become famous in the freight industry. But today with me is Jacquie Meyers, who's currently the managing partner of Mosaic Logistics and was previously the president of Meyers Transport, a 90-year-old fourth-generation family-owned operated LTL trucking company. Now, if you were anywhere in the Greater Toronto area from say 2008 to 2016 in the transportation space, then you already know who Jacquie Meyers is. She could possibly be the most famous person in freight that we've ever had on the show. And even cooler, she is it says here to talk about how you're married. Technically, we're not married. We've been engaged for a very long time. Now we do have all the trimmings of a married couple, child that is, home and all those things. So I like to say we're married for the convenience of not having to explain why people who are in their early 40s are engaged. But with that, welcome, Jacquie.
Thank you for having me.
My absolute pleasure. You know, it's funny, we've obviously had a chance to talk about this show before coming in here today, and Jacquie is a preparing type, for those who know her, again, and I think a lot of people listening on the show might. Well organized, well thought out, well planned, lots of discipline. I, on the other hand, and the exact opposite, which allows me to often do these shows feeling not very nervous because I rarely know what's going on. I am actually a little bit nervous today, as I sit here right now, and I'm trying to impress you still, this many years later. I think though, I'm actually going to have conversations, and again, for the listeners, I didn't let Jacquie know what the conversation topics were going to be today, because I think as much as it was relatively easy to get her as a guest compared to most, well, I shouldn't say that, it was actually very difficult, but I probably won't go into that. She has a lot of interesting things to share and things that I don't have answers to fully and completely, and I didn't want to know for, ensuring we had authenticity on this, and it wasn't just a canned conversation about me asking her things that I already know answers to. And so this is actually a bit of a surprise for her, much to her chagrin in terms of what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm actually going to be learning, some more about her. So I do know this, but I think our listeners would like to know, how did you get into, the trucking space, and how did you become the president of Meyers Transport at, I didn't mention this, but I will now, at 28 years old?
Right, yeah, small detail. It was family business, obviously. So it was my great-grandfather that started Meyers Transport. And much of my life growing up, I think I thought I would be going down that path of joining Meyers and being part of that team, but had to do my own thing. So went to university, studied finance and entrepreneurship, and told my father that I was studying finance, that we could someday take Meyers public, and he said over my dead body. So that was the end of that dream. But finished up university, and the option was I was hoping to go into consulting, and so applied in the consulting world and had my interviews at the top 3 companies that I wanted to work for. And I had decided in my mind, if I didn't get the top of the top consulting job, then the second best option was the family business. And I wasn't going to take a second-tier job elsewhere just to do something else, just to prove myself outside. I thought Meyers was the better choice. So for better or for worse, I did not get a job at the consulting companies, made it to third round, but did not get an offer. So started with the family company and kind of worked my way up through the system. I think I started in pricing and moved around to all different departments and learned the business. So what was the full question? How did I get to be the president? Was that where I was going?
Yeah, I think that actually is that's a point we can go from there, because I think family businesses are so common in transportation and trucking specifically. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's when I look, and I don't know the stats. I feel like I've heard them. I'm going to say 70% are family businesses. I might be making that up, but that just feels about right. And so I think for listeners who are in a family business, and there would be some, if not many, what was it that when you went to, going back in time, if you were to, we can sort of tell the story. You've probably told that story 100 times, but was that the right decision to go into the family business? And I think maybe more specifically, what would you give to advice for people in terms of, sussing out if you should go work in the family business? So you've got a 28-year-old you. What are you telling you when you were 28? Knowing what you know now at I won't say.
Thank you. Well, keep in mind, I wasn't 28 when I joined the company, so I was 22, 23. I mean, being in a family business it can be a ton of fun. It can be wonderful opportunities that don't come up if you're not inside of a family business. I look back on my time at Meyers, and although I never reported to my father, I worked with him basically every day. We were on the phone most days, and that's a lovely life experience to have, to be quote unquote forced to spend time with your father. And my father and I get along famously, and that was a highlight for me. So I really enjoyed that part of working in a family business. I think we'll dive into it in other areas, but there are lots of challenges of working in a family business too. And I think it's really important going in with your eyes wide open of who is currently in the family business, what are their goals and their dreams, what do they want from the next generation. I think it warrants not just a chat, it warrants a lot of thought and open dialogue on where do we want to go and do I actually fit into this? I mean, I'm not sure if you want to go here now, but when I look back at my time at Myers Transport, when I joined the company, my cousin had already joined and she was firmly implanted in operations. That was her skill set. That's where she wanted to be. My father was retired, basically. I don't know if it was openly said that he was retired, but he had one foot well out the door, and he had always been in charge of sales and marketing. And so this is the gap we have in our business. This is the gap that needs to be filled. We need an owner who's in sales. So great, I want to be in the company. I want to be a success. I will take over sales and marketing. That's the road I will go down. In hindsight, that wasn't the right way to do it, I don't think. My passion wasn't in sales. My skill set wasn't in sales. I should have been in operations, admin, finance. I should have been in a different part of the business, but that wasn't the opening at the time. So I think, advice to other, I was going to say young kids, but young adults entering a family business, I would really do some soul searching on your own of what do you love, what are you passionate about, what are you really good at? And does that fit into the family business? Can I fit my passion and my expertise into the business, or am I going to, I hate the saying, but am I going to be a square peg in a round hole? So I think it's really honest dialogue, and it's hard as a kid because you just think, I can be good at anything. As long as there's training, as long as there's help around me, I can be good at anything. Yeah, you can, but are you going to love it? Are you going to enjoy life? I look back on my time, I wouldn't change it for the world. I love the life that I have now. I love what I've created, and I wouldn't be here if I hadn't done all these things. Would I have done it a little bit differently? Yeah, absolutely.
Did you feel a sense of obligation to go into the business? So as much as there was if I don't get these consulting jobs, I'll go and do this. And, maybe there was some self-sabotage in there if you look deeply enough, and, these things can be hard to pin down when they're subconscious to a degree. But was there a sense of obligation to joining the business?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had a a lot of my cousins had gone into different careers, different fields. My cousin and business partner that I ended up working with, the one that was in operations, she did not want to run the company, so there was no heir apparent. So it was, where do we go from here? Are we ready to sell the business as a family? We've had it for 80 some years. Or, Jacquie, do you want to get involved? Huge pressure to step up and to perform and quote unquote do what's right, do the right thing.
And I think timing wise, for those old enough to remember, and most of us should, you were dropped in around 2008 as well. So yes. You took over president in maybe we'll see how the rest of this year and it goes, but up until this point anyway, the worst recession we'd ever been in, sort of in our lifetime anyway, for you and I. Yep. And so you're joining a company that would have been struggling like all transportation companies were at that point, and you've got now you're in a leadership role. From just the stories that I know, it was challenging to make progress, and the company did continue to struggle. Kind of looking back at that time, what do you think were some of the contributors? Not the macroeconomic environment and things that were changing that were hurting everybody fueled these types of things. I mean, like specifically through the lens of a family business. What were some of the obstacles that you were facing at that time that were particularly acute as a now leader president of the company, but with the backdrop of also a market and an industry that was kind of crumbling around everybody at the time?
That's a big question. So when I took over the role of president in 2000, and I think it was 2009 or 2010, people used to joke that, what'd you do wrong to piss off your dad to get that job? Because it was such a hard market. It was a very challenging time. So macroeconomic was really difficult. Then you get into what was happening within our family business. When I look back on it, I think a lot of our culture was based around unanimous decisions. And I wouldn't recommend that to another business. It made things, we had it at almost every level. So at the shareholder level, one lesson I would pass on, our shareholder agreement was, there were 4 of us, and if we didn't unanimously agree, nothing happened. There's a 5th vote, one person gets a double vote. There was no outside board member that could help you come to a decision to move forward. So I found in our business, we got very stuck with, if all 4 of us don't agree, nothing happens, nothing changes. And as you say, times were very difficult. We needed to make changes, we needed to move forward, but we kept getting stuck. And that just trickles all through the company. So then you look at, before I joined as the president, and while I was working my way up, as I said, my father had somewhat retired. My uncle wasn't involved in the day-to-day as much. And so we had 8 vice presidents that were running the company based on unanimous decisions. If you can, picture putting 8 people in any room, any 8 people, and try to come to a unanimous decision. It's almost impossible. Mm-hmm. So you end up with 8 very talented, smart, caring people that want to move the business forward, but none of them have the final say, so none of them can actually push through what probably needs to be pushed through.
Which is anything, in some because you think about just trying to, in enterprise sales, when I say trick, but a fundamental aspect of doing, enterprise sales where you're asking for large dollars on complex sales is building consensus, within the decision-making group that's involved in that. Yeah. And why does that matter? Because lack of consensus equals no movement, no change, no anything, right? When you can't agree, you do nothing at all. I mean, exactly. Take home life, for example. Can't decide on it, nothing happens. And so when you have a business that is, needing to, in some ways, just, even if you make a decision and it's wrong, at least you're learning and failing and pivoting and moving from that. And you're, something I like to say a lot is, sort of one foot in front of the other. Yeah. There's, I think, sometimes sometimes action almost regardless of what it is far superior to inaction.
Yep. And that's where we got stuck. And I totally understand how we got there, because it is a beautiful idea. If you can come to a consensus, I mean, you just all march forward together, it's probably quite beautiful. We just often didn't have a consensus. So you just keep circling in the same little circle of muck, for lack of a better term.
I think that there's something with, again, you say it's sort of beautiful, and it is, because I think it's probably in some ways meant to honor the integrity of the family, to not create an org chart at Thanksgiving dinner.
Well,
right?
exactly, and you do have to sit down for dinner with all of these people, and you have to have a total life outside of business. So, of course, it's way, way easier if everyone agrees.
You've had an opportunity to meet a lot of other family businesses, obviously, and specifically kind of in this geography. And as we mentioned, trucking has an abundance of them. And it almost seems every large trucking company is either a family business or passed down. Like, I mean, these businesses just take so long to build that if you're large, you have to be multi-generational, almost categorically. And so we both had really the privilege of being around a lot of large family-run trucking businesses. Would you say that, and that are successful? And so do you think that if you look at kind of Meyers and you look at these companies, is that one of the things that really differentiates them? Like, if you look at those companies, and I know we don't pretend to get inside every single one, and this isn't meant to be a broad stroke on every company, but fundamentally, if I'm thinking about this, it may not be an easy path, and it may not start that way, and there may be some bodies in the street, in terms of on the path to getting there, but it does seem that there is a single point of decision making, at least in some of these successful businesses, and maybe family or otherwise.
I quickly scanning the companies that I know well, and they're not run by a team.
Right.
It is, I'm trying to think through them now. There's one that has a couple of decision makers that I think are equals, but the rest, it's been through, okay, there's 3 of us involved, and at some point over 5-10 years, they say, this is the decision maker, this is the final say, this is the final vote, this is the leader that we have. It's interesting, because I look at your business where you have 3 co-founders that you guys really have to work in tandem. You have to, you spend so much time together and so many huge decisions. You're lucky that you guys work so well together. And I know as startups, it's basically fundamental. You don't do it on your own.
Yeah.
And yet when you look in the trucking space, it's very different. The companies that I know that have been incredibly successful end up with one leader at the helm.
Yeah, and we have that too, right? Like, Justin Bailie is the CEO and he's the leader, and if it comes down to it, who's the boss? He is.
Right. Yeah.
So we've all collectively agreed to that, but I think we don't have to. We can go home to our own houses at night, and we don't need Thanksgiving dinner together. Yeah. So that your company and Meyers and many of the others don't get to share that, and it creates, and again, it's like you're taking. You talk about the idea of sort of taking your home life into work, and we try not to do that, but when your home life is your work,
absolutely,
and goes back and forth, and there's dissension, and money is tricky, so it feels almost like, what do you call, like a landmine field? It just feels like you're just tiptoeing around bombs all the time, and you're probably going to step on one.
Yeah.
So I think just pivoting from that. So Meyers was a great. I'm imagining, so before we leave that, I want to kind of just go back. So would you say that if you were to kind of go back and talk to yourself going into the business, would you have had that conversation with your partners ahead of time to say, at some point in the near future, we are going to have to build, like, knowing what you know now, would you have recommended that to you and had that conversation? And if they weren't willing to do that, would you have still done it, knowing what you know now?
Oh, good question. I feel like we did have those discussions to some extent. Like, that was the plan, that we were moving along that path. But when it comes to actually executing on it, when it comes to my partners having to say, yes, we fully trust a 29-year-old to make these decisions, I think they struggled when it actually came down to the actions. I think they they believed they wanted to support me as the decision maker, as the leader eventually. I think we were heading down that path. But when rubber hit the road, it's like, okay, or can we really do this? Can we? And I was 29. Like, I understand where the apprehension came in. I understand they've seen more than I'd seen. They'd been through more than I'd been through. So long answer, would I have those discussions up front? Absolutely. It's just hard to know how it's going to play out.
Yeah, no, that's really fair. And so from that business, so heavy asset-based business, and just for context for listeners, there was I'm just going to know from my own history numbers, somewhere in that kind of peaking at around 500 employees, 350 trucks, large organization. And then looking at the business and around sort of 2016, deciding for yourself that you wanted to make a pretty fundamental career change. And not just in the vertical of transportation, but the entire model of the business. Like even kind of adding more, this is an LTL carrier. So heavy real estate footprint, heavy physical capital asset footprint.
Yes.
And so what did you do in 2016? And maybe we'll just tell the listeners a little bit about Mosaic Logistics and kind of how that came to be, and what that looks like today and why you did that.
Yeah, so obviously enormous life pivot, career pivot, everything. That was, if we want to get into the real details, also went through a divorce that year. So I totally pivoted my personal life as well. Why did I do it? Oh gosh, there's lots of answers to that. But let's go to the Mosaic pivot specifically. Running an LTL asset-based company is hard. Like my hat's off to everyone running LTL companies, even truckload companies. Asset-based trucking is so hard. There are so many things stacked against you. It is so complicated and so complex, and so there's just...
And the reward at the end is not always great, is it? If it's for fiscal prosperity, it doesn't always yield. You can put all the hard work you want in, but a couple bad accidents, then it's all gone.
Exactly. And that's... Some LTL companies do exceptionally well, and the rewards at the end of the year are probably very well worth it, but they are few and far between. And there are so many that, exactly, the squeeze isn't worth the juice. It's a hard job. Did I love it and have fun at it? Absolutely. But when you look at third-party logistics and brokerage, it is so much more streamlined. It's so much more, here's my skill set, here's what I'm good at, here's what I can do. In asset-based, you need to know about maintenance of the trucks. And I don't even want to go on and on about the different areas of expertise you need as a leader in asset-based trucking. Whereas in third-party brokerage, it doesn't do 3PLs justice to say you need a smaller skill set, but it's a more refined skill set. It's quite frankly easier. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to say that without diminishing what 3PLs do, because we also do a job that's really, really hard, which is the sales and marketing of it and the customer service and helping asset-based companies up their game. Anyway, different skill set, I think.
Yeah, and I think also like you're not wrong to say that, but it's the risk reward profile is much better. I mean, your high end reward can be extraordinary. Yep. And your low end risk is not that bad. When you and it's kind of really inverse on trucking largely. Yeah, sir. Just superstitious for anybody who heard the knock on the wood coming through the microphone there. But it's in asset based there is just it's a much steeper climb, and far and fewer get to the top of that mountain in terms of their outsized returns and outside reward. Yeah. Where I think it is disproportionate in terms of brokerage. So to say it's easier, I think again is probably not the right way. More refined is a really nice way to put it. Yeah. And I think if I look at the business, and kind of watched you go from that, I think about not just moving simply from, asset based to non-asset based. But if you look at the way the business is set up today, it is a business that, and we won't go, these are private companies, so we won't go fully into the weeds on this, but a company that is a 20th of the employee base.
And handpicked by me.
Correct. Built your way.
Yeah.
Completely remote.
Yep.
Digital first.
Yep.
I do want to go on that from the customer experience side in a second, and also pretty profitable. It earns a good living. And it's a business that really just seems to work much, and the people are really happy working there, right?
It's night and day. Yeah. It was tough at Meyers because people have been doing some of those jobs for 20, 30 years and didn't really want to be there.
Yeah.
They needed to put food on the table, so you show up every day. I really feel my team now enjoys coming to work. They enjoy working together. They enjoy spitballing. They enjoy, there's just lots of laughter in our meetings. There's lots of fun. It's spectacular to, as an asset-based company, we struggled to grow the business. You're commoditized, and it's really hard to grow the business. Now with Mosaic, we're on track to probably double our sales over the last 2 years, and we're aiming to double it. So we'll basically triple ourselves within the next 4 years. It's a lot of fun doing that, right? It's fun for the team to see we're growing, we're bringing on new business, the new customers are loving us, we're bringing on new team members. It's really fun to grow. So it's a very different environment than, we were kind of slogging at Meyers. You're just eking away a little bit of growth every year, a little bit better at a little bit of different things. It's just a very, very different environment.
I was talking to a company about Meyers' size last week or the week before, and we were kind of talking through some business strategies just for them as conversations that I tend to have with our customers. And we talked about the difference between brokerage and asset base, and they're kind of standing up a brokerage today, and we're talking about sort of sales hires specifically. The amount of margin, just in brokerage compared to asset alone, you look at how fast brokerage is growing, how much freight is moved through brokerages today, and anybody has to ask me, I have no reason to believe that 90% of all freight will not be moved through brokerages in the next 5 years. I think it's already 70, and that was 50 5 years ago. So if at this rate, even if it doesn't even compound, so we're moving towards where most freight will move through brokers, and they just have such an opportunity to, quite frankly, hire more expensive people. There's a whole bunch of ways I can dress that up, but that's the reality, because the margins are such that you can actually do that. Yeah. The rewards that you can put salespeople on commissions that get them into nice 6-figure incomes. Yeah. That's very difficult when you're working on 3% margins. Very difficult, and it's so hard to track your margins in trucking to begin with, so you don't even know if you really made any money. And so it's just trying to put the difference, the unfair advantage that brokers do have in this space. And I think in a way that kind of leads to some of the, and I think this is changing a lot, but some of the resentment that asset-based carriers have towards brokers. Yeah. And I think asset-based carriers, are getting better at this, and especially the smaller ones, but I don't think they do the greatest of job of leaning into the brokers and using them the way that, I don't mean this to be combative, but use them the way that brokers use them back. I think there's an opportunity for carriers to leverage brokers a lot better than they do, especially the big ones. Yep. But that's probably a different conversation for a different day. Yeah. So if we look at when you kind of went from, and so I'm trying to paint the picture of kind of this 90-year-old, old school company, stuck in the muck, as you say, in terms of just progress because you can't make decisions, hundreds of people, hundreds of trucks. Yeah. And then Mosaic, which is nimble and fast and lean and modern. Yeah. And I think the thing that we're not talking about, or we are, but we're just not saying it clearly, is that, and you kind of alluded to by talking about carriers being commoditized, rightly or wrongly. Mm-hmm. It's the value that you can control now. You have a value add that you bring to the market that you can control, because I understand the business, so I'll say it, is that Mosaic is largely an LTL-based 3PL, mm-hmm. which is kind of unique. Mm-hmm. And you kind of approach it as a carrier alternative, almost in a sense, from an LTL side, because most LTL carriers have their own salespeople. So traditionally, you don't get a lot of brokerages that are going to be focusing on that industry, because now it's kind of a competitive, and finding LTL trucks isn't hard, but I say this often, is that the work of a truckload broker happens or 3PL happens before the freight is picked up, finding the truck, doing the work. But once the freight is loaded and it's going, it's probably for, mostly okay. You can kind of take your hands off a little. LTL is the opposite. Finding the trucks isn't all that hard, especially if it's kind of that 1 to 4 common carrier freight. But it breaks, it gets lost, it goes into a black hole and pops up 3 days to 3 weeks later. And all the things that go on with LTL. So it's not as if that there isn't an absurd amount of complexities and challenges that happen in the LTL side. They just seem to happen at a different stage of the transport of the goods.
Yes.
So I think being able to be a business that sits between the customer and the carrier to help massage those things, to answer the phone on one call. And I know it sounds simple, but call an LTL carrier and try and track your freight today.
Yeah.
You'll see why calling Mosaic and getting an answer after, or any LTL broker for that matter, after 2 rings and having the information at your fingertips, or having a digital interface that they can see.
Yeah.
Drives all the value in the world. Hence why the business is growing, because you can focus on value.
Yeah.
Where when you have an asset-based carrier, how do you change? What do you actually, I don't even know. I'm sure there's someone smarter listening to this that could tell me right now, but what do you do? Offer expedite? Change your entire operating model, shift a truckload? What are you actually going to do to deliver new levels of value when there's that many pieces in the machinery that you can't really affect change if you wanted to anyway? We're going to deliver 100% on time now, right?
For $1 zillion.
Yeah, but you couldn't even do it anyway. You still couldn't do it. There's too many people touching it. There's too many cooks in the proverbial kitchen.
Yep.
So this isn't the carrier's fault. This isn't anybody's fault. This is just the way it actually is.
Yeah. It's real life. But again, I'm now awarded the luxury of stepping back, talking to our customers, and yes, your freight did get lost and it did disappear for 3 weeks. Yes, they lost a whole trailer. Yep, that happened. And the customer can say, that's insane. How dumb is the carrier? You know what? Every carrier has lost a trailer. Every carrier has lost freight. We can switch to another carrier and we can show you the alternative options, but you know what? They're also going to lose your skid.
Yeah.
Salespeople at asset-based trucking companies, you never get to step back and say, I know my competitors are losing freight, because the customer says, no, they aren't.
Right.
So-and-so never loses my freight. I've been with them and they're perfect.
So there are no perfect carriers, is that saying? And you get that purview of it. And I think also being from the space, you can speak with a certain authority to say, for 100 years we had trucks, so this is actually how it works.
Yep.
And because we're not in that business, we're pretty agnostic to just telling you the truth.
Yep.
Right? And
Exactly.
we're also carrier agnostic in terms of we're not trying to commoditize them. And it's interesting in a way, because I've listened to the Mosaic calls, and I've talked to a lot of the people there. There's this really nice balance there between empathy for the customer and the carrier, because some of the people at Mosaic today worked at Meyers. They've worked in asset base. They understand what actually happens in trucking. And I think that's really important to not always shit on the carrier. It's always the carrier's fault. They always did this. They're just dumb. It's not an explanation. That's not. You don't get to be 1,000 trucks and 200 million in revenue because you're dumb.
Yep.
It doesn't work like that.
And our team loves the carriers. They are absolutely, we are more carrier centric than any other 3PL I've worked with, and it's exactly that. They lived and breathed it. They know how hard it is. They know how unrewarding it is too. So it's we have a lot of empathy for our carriers, and I like to think we support them and we help deliver on their goals by doing the sales and marketing side of it and defending them. It's not that they're dumb. This is just what happens when you're moving 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 shipments every day. It's just what happens.
So you're happy over here?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Wouldn't change a thing.
Okay, so you are sorry, do you want to add something?
No, my ops manager keeps encouraging us to buy trucks and get back into that, and I keep saying, heck no.
No, I would. I second that resistance.
Yeah.
I think you know my theory on business. If the revenue's not reoccurring and there's assets involved, I'm not interested. So anyway, that's one of those. So you're a woman.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. And being a woman in the industry with, I think, and we've had some conversations around this before. I'm actually interested in your perspective, because I think there's a bit of a setup here where it's like, you're a woman in the industry and you're like, oh, it was the worst, and men grabbed my ass, and all these types of things. But you've actually had a bit of a different perspective on that. So maybe share that with the group, because actually I like some of the thought processes you have around this.
I think it's been an advantage for me. I think back to our first, my first Ontario Trucking Association convention, where there's 300, 400 people in the room, mostly executives at trucking companies, and there were maybe 5 women there. So am I memorable? Yep. Are you remembering all of the other guys that you met? Probably not all that much. Meeting customers, is it rare to have, and now we're talking, what is this, 10, 12 years ago?
More than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was a few years ago. I love it now. I do see far more women in leadership roles within transportation. It makes my heart sing. I'm so happy to see that. But back when I started, there were very, very few of us. So yeah, I did stand out. I think customers remembered me. I think we got opportunities because of it. I also have found recruiting talent it's been very, very helpful being a woman and being different than every other trucking company out there. I've been able to attract talent that I don't think I would have been able to had I been a man. Now, are there downsides? Of course. Did I miss out on things being talked at in the boys' club? Absolutely, for sure. There are just certain things you can't fit into and certain discussions you won't be privy to. Yep, I missed out on some of those.
You didn't miss much. Trust me, I've been involved in them. What did chimpanzees say to each other in a group, right?
That was your comment, not mine. And there's you joke that the getting your ass slapped, there's actually a very dark element of that. And it's, when you go to a conference, you have to make sure you go up in the elevator alone. And there are certain things.
Or not alone.
No, alone, because.
Oh, alone. Oh, sorry, right, got it.
Then you can be followed to your room. So yeah, advice for young women in the space at conferences, you go up in the elevator alone. That's a lot safer.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's challenges, but that's not trucking. That's just, I think that's life as a woman. I hope and pray that it's better. I think it is better for the next generation coming up. I do think things are changing, thank goodness. But yeah, there are different challenges for women in the industry, in any industry.
So speaking of women challenges, how about mom challenges? And so, and again, I'm privy to the business that you have today, and you set it up in such a nice way to be able to, I think, really, again, work from home and manage, Kayla to a point, but there's a lot of balancing and a lot of, I won't speak for you, so why don't you speak and tell me about that component of it?
Yeah, being a mom and having a career, very, very, very challenging. I mean, you'll look at my life. I had my daughter very late in life. There's a reason for that. You can't run a large LTL or medium-sized LTL company. I shouldn't say you can't. I was not able to do that while juggling. Like, you couldn't even think about it because the business is so all-consuming. So I have been lucky enough to be able to do it later in life. I'm lucky enough I set myself up well to have a whole bunch of support, but it's still really hard. It's, this is in my own head, but when I'm with my daughter, I feel guilty for not working. And when I'm working, I feel guilty for not being with my daughter. Mm-hmm. And no matter, I guess I can say our daughter, but no matter how much I try and get out of that, I can't. It's a saying that has always resonated is mothers are supposed to work like they don't have children, and they're supposed to mother like they don't have a job. Mm-hmm. How the hell is that possible? Mm-hmm. So there are just these enormous expectations on women to be able to do it all. Thank goodness men have progressed a heck of a lot, and they're, I really want they're chipping in. And it's not that men aren't doing enough. It's you simply can't. When it's a newborn, when it's a young infant, there's not that much that men can do. Mm-hmm. But it all falls on the mom, which is really, really hard.
And so how have you balanced that? Like what is the actual thing you do? Again,
in my head, I still don't know that I'm doing it right. I'm very lucky. I have help at home. I have a very supportive partner, obviously. I scaled back my work enormously. I make it a priority. When Kayla's done school at 3:30, I'm going to go pick her up. Am I still going to sneak in work later that night? Yes. But I'm also going to pick her up and be present and do my best to play with her without thinking about my to-do list and everything I need to do for the job.
There was an interesting comment you just made there where it was, I prioritize it. I will pick her up at 3:30 after school, but I'll do work later.
Yeah.
So you actually just sort of played into the narrative that you just spoke through, right? You just, even because you still succumbed to that guilt even just in that statement. So it's pretty deep, eh?
Because who should be allowed to leave work at 3 o'clock to go get their child?
Right. Me.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. And the men that do it, I don't think feel the guilt that women do.
Yeah.
So I've tried, in our business, I try very much to be open. Our team members have kids, and I try to acknowledge that, yes, a kid is sick at home today. So yes, if you can work 2 hours, great. If you can't, you have to take it off. That's okay, and that's part of our culture. And I look back at my time in Meyers Transport, and that's one thing I kind of regret, that I did not understand work-life balance. I was raised by a wonderful mother who will probably listen to this, but a workaholic. Mm-hmm. And it was ingrained in me. You wake up in the morning, you open up your laptop and start working, and before you go to bed at night, you're working. So that was my expectation. Running the company was my expectation. Everybody else was doing that too. But they had kids, they had lives, they had things going on. So I think part of my growth and part of my process has been acknowledging work isn't the number one thing, and it's still hard for me to even say it out loud.
Yeah.
But your family has to be the number one thing. In my opinion, that is now my number one thing. Mm-hmm. So it's trying to rejig the way I think about things. To not undermine myself by saying, oh gosh, now I missed 2 hours. I've got to catch up the full 2 hours.
Yeah, look at you sitting here with me just pontificating and sitting on a soapbox. You could be grinding, Jackie. You could be grinding right now.
Don't worry, I will.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You're sweating right now, even in the jest. So you built a really, I think, cool culture at Mosaic.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think anybody who works there, who has seen it and worked with them would agree, and I think a lot of your customers would agree too. A lot of women in proportionally in that business, and one that kind of has an interesting model where, again, it's small enough that maybe this works and potentially this breaks, at scale. Mm-hmm. But largely, I want to choose this carefully, but managementless to a degree, or without kind of there's sort of you sort of sitting sort of at the top from an operations perspective, but everybody else is really, you've kind of built this very sort of democratic, almost like or democratized, I guess, business where everybody kind of knows what to do. They pull for each other, and there's certain people who are experts, and they just kind of know when to go with each other and when to ask for help. But really, with the absence of I am the boss, this is how it's done type thing. And when you talk about, you hear the term flatline organization, you've really built a model flatline organization.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
What type of people are you looking, how have you done that, I guess? And I know this is probably a big question, so maybe more specifically, what are the types of people you have to hire? What are the traits you're looking for in people in order to get that type of workforce?
I think it's being really clear up front. Like when we do our interviewing, so we use headhunters for everything. We don't do any of our own, grassroots hiring. It's all headhunters to find the best of the best that we can. And then it's having a really open dialogue of, I do not want to manage you. And even, we do have an operations manager. He is our manager. But he doesn't love managing. He loves executing. He loves the day-to-day of brokerage and finding equipment and finding successes, and that's what he does. So it's when we're hiring, we're saying, we do not want to manage you. So if you want someone to watch over your shoulder, to be there day in and day out, that's not our org. We need high-end performers that like to play as a team, that want to work with each other, that are happy to pick up the slack of other people when needed, knowing it'll go the other way as well. and knowing that's what we're not looking over your shoulder. We're not hiring kids. We're hiring successful, driven adults that want to perform for the sake of performing because they get enjoyment out of that. And so I think we've done an exceptional job of building a team that doesn't want to be managed, certainly doesn't want to be micromanaged. And it's worked really well for us. As you say, will it work as we get bigger and bigger? It's probably going to get a little bit challenging, but we're kind of navigating that now. As we add people to the team, it's how do we keep this working successfully?
You said something interesting around, and I think this is a wise, and I don't want to say this is a woman thing, but we had a guest on, Ellen Voya from Women in Trucking, and she made this comment around sort of, it was around who would you want running a truck down the highway, a testosterone-filled male and kind of competitive and all the things you kind of like conjure up in your mind when you think about a testosterone-fueled man driving the truck down the road, or an estrogen-fueled woman, looking for, and again, whatever those traits would be, and I can't think of them off the top of my head. So I think about what you said to me before around, I don't know if we want to grow to X amount. Like, I think we only want to be this big, which is very non-competitive, very non-testosterone, right? So testosterone is like, build a brokerage as big as you can and make it, $1 trillion, and like really for no reason. Like, what are you even going to do with that, right? That's a second question, and again, probably another topic unto itself. But like, these sort of testosterone-fueled growth goals, I'll call them, to be kind of derogatory about it. And then there's your wise saying there's a place where I found the business to be in a really sweet place where I can manage it without putting in, I'll say 40 hours a week. I'm supposed to say 60 hours a week, right? So people think it's 50,
yes.
but I'm not doing that. I'm not going to support that because this is what we're trying to do here.
Don't tell
right?
my mom.
Okay, don't listen. Okay, we'll have to edit that out. But then there's like, but there's a point where you're like, this is enough. That might be where I want to be because the team starts to break. The culture starts to break. As you just said to me about the layer in managers, maybe that's not what we want to do.
Yep.
How do you have the nerve to do that? Like, what is that? Because I think there's a lot of grace and maturity in being able to say, I do not win by having, the biggest. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like you're saying that this is my nirvana.
I mean, we haven't gotten there yet, so we're still growing, right?
Yeah.
So I haven't actually been tested in the, okay, are we going to slow down now or not?
Yeah.
And you can't ever stop growing. It's just the extreme goals might become more manageable.
Yeah, they can become quality, right? It can be, different types of customers, or maybe even getting rid of some customers that don't sort of fit the model based on whatever that model might be. You can start getting more selective and making things a little more judicious around. So you can, I think, stunt growth without stunting the company at the same time. There are tricks the way to do that. And you're right, you haven't been, your metal has not been tested in terms of now we're going to do that. So I guess it's to be seen. But I think it's a concept you just don't hear about very often. You don't hear people say that very often, especially in working in a startup.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's like blasphemous.
Exactly.
I don't know. I've run the very large company and it wasn't super fun.
Yeah.
Running this company right now is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying it, and I don't want to ruin this.
Yeah. So, on closing, I think we'll go out on this because I think I want to finish that thought then. So if money isn't the end all and be all of the business, then what is?
Of the business or of life?
Yeah, life.
Getting deep on
here,
JB.
Well, this is what we do. Welcome to Freight Famous. It's really not a lot about freight.
So what is the be-all, end-all? Is this like, what's the point of life?
Well,
is this where we're going?
Oh, geez. I guess I kind of brought us down here, didn't I? All right, let me back on that for a second. I think it's if we look at a business that says we're going to grow to $1 bazillion, therefore we're the most successful company in the world. Like, how do we measure? We measure countries in GDP. Everything is about money.
Yep.
And again, totally never the conversation. It's anyway, my thoughts on that. We won't go. We don't go down there today. It's political. But what is then the goal of Mosaic, or what are you measuring to feel successful?
Are you enjoying it?
Yeah.
Are you having fun? Do you want to, quote unquote, go into the office? Do you want to show up every day and do it? And I do.
Yeah.
So this is success for me. Again, as at the start I said, follow your passion, because when you're doing what you enjoy, you do well.
Yeah.
So my team and I are enjoying what we're doing. We're in roles that we believe we should be in. The financial results are following. So yeah, maybe the top goal isn't to be a bazillion-dollar company. Maybe it's the top goal to enjoy doing it, and it won't be a bazillion, but it'll be enough zillions for me.
Right. Well, that's beautiful. Thank you for doing this with me today. This was, again, I think listeners think this was easy. This was one of the hardest guests I had to get on the show. So thank you for coming in and doing this in person.
Thank you for
this
having
was
me.
a really awesome pleasure and privilege, and thanks team for letting us do this. This was really nice.
Absolutely.
If you like this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe it. You can certainly listen to more. We have a pretty nice backlog of shows that you can listen to, and lots of future ones to come. Bye for now.
Cheers.